If you've been looking for a classic comfort food dessert recipe, well, today is your day. Let's make bread pudding with whiskey sauce. You'll need nutmeg, cinnamon, half and half, an 11 by 7 glass baking dish, butter, eggs, and vanilla extract. The first step will be to butter your dish really well. When the butter gets too soft to do it this way, I just put a Ziploc bag on my hand and spread it around that way. So once it has been sufficiently buttered, you can set it aside and you'll get your oven preheated to 350 degrees. You can use pretty much any kind of bread. Sandwich bread works great, but I really like to use French bread. The texture of the French bread is just so airy and porous that it really soaks up the custard well. And it's best if the bread is day old or more. So if it's kind of stale, that's really what you want. Once we have this sliced, I'm just going to tear it up into chunks. The chunks don't need to be any bigger than about 1.5 inches, but you can experiment with different sizes. You just don't want them to be so big that they can't soak up the liquid effectively. So we'll get the bread torn up and then we'll be ready to place it in the pan and start our next step. Time to move all of the torn up bread into the buttered pan, and you can see the sizes that you're shooting for. That would be true whether it was sandwich bread or this French type bread. Once we've got all the torn bread in the dish, we're going to drizzle the top of it with about 3 tablespoons of melted butter. It doesn't have to be covered all the way because as this cooks, everything will blend together and this butter will distribute itself a little more evenly. But about 3 tablespoons of melted butter over the top of your torn up bread. Now let's start on the filling. We'll need 4 eggs, and when I have duck eggs, I do use duck eggs for all of my cooking and baking, but chicken eggs work fine. Then we're going to add just under a cup of sugar. This is just granulated sugar. We'll get these mixed together well before we add the next ingredient, which is half and half. You can use milk also, but half and half just gives it a richer and more satisfying texture and flavor. It'll take 2 cups of half and half or milk. We'll get this mixed together well, and then we'll be ready to add our spices. I like using cinnamon and nutmeg, but you can experiment with different flavors. Allspice or cloves might even be nice in it. And you can also add fruit. I've had it with raisins or apples or peaches even. But this is just going to be a simple, basic recipe today. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, maybe a little more, and about 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. Next, we're going to put our vanilla extract. For this size of a batch, we're going to put about a teaspoon, maybe a tiny bit more than a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we just blend and blend and blend and blend until everything is incorporated and evenly distributed. And now it's time to get it all put together. So we're just going to pour this mixture over the bread in the pan. Cover it as much as you can. And then this is a very important step. With a fork, you're going to press the bread down into the mixture just to help it absorb more of this egg and half and half mixture. And once you have it pretty much pressed down enough that you can see it's absorbed a lot of the liquid, the next most important step is to let it sit for a little while. I leave mine sitting out on the counter for an hour. You can put it in the refrigerator even and leave it overnight, but if it can at least sit for about an hour, it does a great job of soaking up that liquid. Next, we move it to our preheated oven and set the timer for 45 minutes. Now let's get started on our whiskey sauce. We need 1 1/4 sticks of butter, that's 10 tablespoons, and we'll be melting that on medium heat on the stove. To that we'll add 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar, stir that all together and let it take some time to melt. I'm also going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Just keep stirring and letting it get melted and blended together. It's very important that the sugar is completely dissolved before we add the last 2 ingredients. So once the sugar has dissolved completely, we're going to add 1 well-beaten egg and whiskey of your choice. You don't have to add the whiskey. It does give it a nice rich flavor. I'm gonna get 3 tablespoons of whiskey ready to go. I may or may not need them all. I'll taste test after I've added about 1 tablespoon each time. Now you can see that that sugar has completely dissolved. You want to be very careful and add the beaten egg really slowly and stir briskly the whole time so that you don't end up with scrambled eggs in your sauce. Once you've got the egg all blended in nicely, you can start adding the whiskey. There's my first taste test. I do want a little more. Now I've added just shy of 2 tablespoons. We're going to do one more taste test. And let's go ahead and add the rest of that whiskey. We'll leave this on the stove on low. We don't want it to cool because it gets thick as it cools. And we'll start poking holes in the top of our bread pudding with a fork. This will allow the sauce to seep into all the cracks and crevices. So poke as many holes as you can. And once you've got a nice number of holes poured, you can start pouring the sauce over the top. I use about half of the sauce I make right away, but the rest I'll set aside to serve with leftovers. Once I've got about half of the sauce over the top of the bread pudding, I'll go back with my little pastry brush and just spread it out. I like to let it get down the edges around the sides so that it can coat the edges of the bread pudding. This reheats nicely. It will need to be stored in the refrigerator along with that leftover sauce. but you'll want to reheat it in the oven. It doesn't turn out the same if you reheat it in the microwave. Now we're just getting this remaining sauce ready to put in the refrigerator. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll give this recipe a try. If you liked what you saw, please give this video a like. Thank you for stopping by the channel and checking this out. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd be honored to have you join my little YouTube family by subscribing. Here's the true test here. This is a classic recipe and a family favorite here at RichKat Ranch. Be safe, be happy, be well, be blessed, and I'll see you in the next video.